Let me get a picture before I tell you about who's on today's walk. Barnes, hold on. Sir Barkalot's with me. Just a picture of the path, just to get a first frame of the walk. 160 ISO, 4.5, f4.5, shutter speed 1500, beautiful. Light, sunny morning. And there we go. Barnes has... where have you gone? You've started the walk without me, have you? I see. We've got some super guests coming up over the next month and weeks. Let me whet your appetite. Howard Barlow, a music photographer who's made some iconic photographs of Bowie, Queen on stage. I feel so fortunate to have witnessed Freddie Mercury in concert with Queen. Paul McCartney and Wings. He has this love of street. And then in terms of politics, there are some moments definitely to talk with him about, including the unfortunate moment for the Labour leader Michael Foot, at any rate, caught having a good nose pick on the conference stage. Then there's former zookeeper turned National Geo photographer and explorer Jason Edwards, with passport stamps from 70 countries and a close call with an anaconda. Ooh. And Sweden's Ellen Burge, whose photographs and stories about humanity and faith I know you'll love. I think we're at a stage where we need a researcher, you know. Applications in crayon on the back of a postcard from Bognor Regis, please. Now, I had a book through the post the other day. A photo book called The Little Book of Camden Passage. It's I think I'm right in saying it's A5 sized. It's got a red cover, foiled title on the front. If you're a listener of the FujiCast podcast, which I present every other week with my reprobate mate Mullins, you may be familiar with this book because Kev did a review of it, which was literally right up his street. Because he loves street, and this is a book of street and environmental portraits made in North London at a place called Camden Passage. And as the name suggests, it's not really a large, grand statement kind of street. It's, as the guidebooks will tell you, a modest, charming street, dating back to the 18th century, famous for its antique markets and vintage jewellery, independent boutiques, cosy cafes. And it's the photographic playground to my guest today, professional singer Gary Williams, who has just embarked upon his photographic career. He, like me, swapped microphone for, well, I want to say micro 4/3 because it just scans well. But anyway, microphone for a camera of whatever sense of flavour. But I like the idea of photographic playgrounds. I suppose in many ways, I have one which, by virtue of the time we spend together walking on this podcast, you've got it too. This wonderful Kennet and Avon Canal where I record many of these podcasts, despite having grand plans to say to you each show, well, this week I'm walking in France, which, funnily enough, I might be doing in October, actually, in mountains with you and a friend of the show, Craig Hughes, but that's another story to come. But yes, this here is my playground. Anyway, Gary Williams, he's my guest today, and I thought you might like to hear his story because Gary is one of life's glass overflowing characters. Never mind half empty, half full, and so on. If Gary was bringing a glass to the table, it would be one of those glasses filled right to the brim, which slops over the side slightly onto your new sneakers as you walk along. But I love his story. It's a story of finding a photographic career later on in life. Easy, Neil, says Gary. I'm still of an age where I can be your younger, better-looking brother. Point taken, Gary. But yes, he comes to a photographic career later on in life, but also it's a story of something I'd like to do more. We talk so much about making your own photo projects and perhaps bringing tactile life to them in the form of a book. And he has a story of photographing designing and self-publishing this fabulous little book of Camden Passage, a corner of London that's become, well, very much his photographic playground.
Today on the Photo Walk.
A friend of mine called me up and said that Martin Parr is doing a workshop in Delhi, and shall we go? When you've got a camera in your hand, it makes you really look. You're looking at the light, you're looking at the shadows, you're looking for personalities, interesting people, interesting things. I think we need a project, right? We need some kind of focus on, rather than just going out and say, okay, I'm going to take some pictures, go out and do some street photography today. I think it's much better if we've got some kind of idea of what we're aiming to achieve. And you can imagine my nerves, Neil, when it came back. And yes, that was a really exciting, thrilling, but terrifying moment as you unbox them, having put so much time and so much work into it. But I was really happy. I was really thrilled with the result. And it just felt like a proper book. It felt like something.
That's Gary Williams, who you'll be hearing from on the show today. Stand by for enthusiasm is all I can say. It's infectious enthusiasm, the positive kind, the very positive kind. Welcome along as we make our photo walks together, a show where we walk and make pictures, photographically sketchbooking our time together each week, enjoying the letters and inspirational stories you've sent in and listening back to special studio conversations with guests from around the world. I'll take a peek into the mailbag in a moment for a flavour of today's letters into the show. But before that, thank you to our extra milers and Patreon and MPB who sponsor this show and keep us here week on week. They are, MPB this is, the largest global platform to buy, sell and trade in used photo and video gear. They're committed to making gear more accessible and committed to making it more affordable. They're rated excellent on Trustpilot, with more than 40,700 reviews and climbing. Really now, 5 stars with that many reviews. No wonder, and I mean this, they're the largest global platform to buy, sell and trade used photo and video kit. MPB is not a marketplace. They buy directly from visual storytellers, like me, like you. And they evaluate all the items before they resell them as an MPB-approved kit list. Now, I've been to the warehouse, in the UK that is, although you'll find the same in the US and Europe, and I've watched this process and I can tell you, it's thorough, which means you can trust what you're buying and feel confident that anything you send in to sell or trade is also looked after properly, or looked over properly actually. That, for me, is the advantage over buying through, well, you know who. I use MPB myself for my kits because I totally believe in the circular market wherever I can use it. You can buy, sell and trade your kit and make that old kit that you haven't used for ages but still works like a dream, make it work for you. Sell it through mpb.com/change and trade into gear that you've wanted to use for a while. I'll have a link on the show page today, but it's important, please, to use the whole URL for us. Go to mpb.com/change. On the show today then, Bill Marriott finds that photography can culturally connect in a magical way. Peter Upton is in a race against time to photograph some famous landmarks before the rising tides lay claim to them. Chris Hughes is embracing his inner Daidō Moriyama. Harriet Langridge has some street photography thoughts, and I have some Scottish news. There seems to be a last-minute opportunity for you to join us on the second week. Yes, really. So, pack your bag, your camera bag that is, and your other bag with the undies and that stuff, and a fully charged camera. You and I, with some new friends, are spending a week in the Highlands. This is going to be one of those busy walks, so let's stride out then, shall we? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots, check. SD cards or a spare roll of film, check. And your calendar open to clear it for the second week of September. If you could mark that off as a checklist item. Let's walk. Finding escapism and peace away from the noise of this world, putting miles under our feet and making a picture or two to remind us of where those footprints were left. You're walking along with me. Come on, Barnes. He's a creature of habit, you know, this dog. He's saying, I usually go up this path. Today we're taking this path. Come on. Left instead of right. Making a picture or two to remind us of where those footprints were left. You're walking with me and Barnes now, yes, on this photo walk today with your letters from the mailbag and, well, as you'll hear through my conversation in the show today, one of the most wondrously enthusiastic, with capital underlined E, guests, Gary Williams. It's a bit windy as well, actually. It's just sort of blown up out of nowhere. I'm sure you can't hear it at the moment. I'm walking into the wind. Honestly, though, I wish I could somehow package the utter joy Gary Williams finds in his photography and somehow pop it into a camera bag as an accessory. My other listeners already giving me the side eye of confusion, I could tell. Shall we dive into the mailbag? Yes, Neil. Let's do that. We'll start with our friend Bill Marriott in America land, whose letter really does touch on a few things that Gary's going to talk about today. And certainly touch on in terms of photographing shopkeepers in India. Greetings, Neil, says Bill. I thoroughly enjoyed the special edition on street portraiture. It's one of your best, and I thought it was very comprehensive. However, hang on everybody, I feel a complaint is flooding in. Sound the alarm, prepare to repel borders. However, one point about photographing strangers was not covered that I feel is important, at least for me. And that's the way photographing people provides a bridge to new cultures and can lead to a sense of inclusion. Let me explain, says Bill. Please do. And I think we can put the complaint klaxon to one side, perhaps. Recently, I attended a festival celebrating the Puerto Rican culture in the Buffalo, New York community. Now, I knew this would be a colourful event for doing street photography, so I was determined to take full advantage of the opportunity. Nobody was really interested in going along with me, so I set out on my own. When I arrived, I realised I was, well, very much out of place in the crowd of several thousand attendees. Firstly, I was clearly one of the few greys in this largely youthful crowd. And culturally, visiting from my home in North Carolina, not really a part of this Buffalo community. I certainly didn't appear to be specifically part of the Buffalo Puerto Rican community. Consequently, I felt a slight sense of isolation. But I set about photographing the people at the event, and that instantly brought me closer to the individuals in the crowd, and it was clear that we're, well, all just one. All there to enjoy the event and proudly celebrate this beautiful culture. Well, after I shot a couple of hundred pictures of groups and individuals, I certainly felt included and welcome in the community. And this, I think, is, perhaps a clear example of how street photography leads to a deeper understanding of the people I photograph and always provides a bridge to be a part of a new experience and culture. I don't know whether you heard that in the background. Early morning pinstripe, setting off for London. There it goes. I can't see through the other side, Neil. I've told you this before. It's just there through the trees. Long green train. Yeah, pinstriped express. I'll provide a link to my photos, Neil, and hopefully you'll see what I'm talking about. Thank you again. Thank you, and the 4 presenters who made the special edition podcast such a success. Well, firstly, thank you for the kind comments on the special. I shall leave a link on the show page to it. There are more specials coming up, though with the summer of busyness, I sense there'll be more a late autumn and winter occupation. Secondly, super pictures, Bill, which you will see if you follow the link on the show page. You'll see Bill's pictures. I can see how you certainly settled into the event with real confidence. There are some cool-looking biker dudes, for example, lots and lots of colour. And, I like busier shots, actually, so the busy shots really played to my enthusiasm when it comes to street photography. And you are so right about this thing we do, how it can culturally connect. And, well, in a world that sometimes might sound, perhaps even feel at times, like the narrative is more about disconnection, I know that this summer has felt like that, well, in the UK anyway, for me at times, if you follow the news, but the real lion's share of people on this beautiful planet want to be as one, as you so rightly say. So super letter. Thank you for sending that in, Bill, and I'll share those pictures on the show page today. It's the photo walk of a Friday. I love to receive your letters. Do send them in. 2,500 pixels wide, please, if you can do that, so we can optimize them for the show page. Send us links, etc., to your Instagram or your website, Flickr, and so on. And send them with your stories, your photographic life stories, 2 stories at photowalk.show. Stories at photowalk.show. You probably hear that as a barge going by in the background. Oh yeah, morning. I just saw it peeking through the reeds here. Otherwise I'd have made a picture for you, but it's a bit too obscured for a picture. I'd have said this is a picture of a barge. You'd have looked at it and said, where is the barge, Neil? So keep sending your letters, your thoughts, your stories in, and I'll read them out on the photo walk. It's what drives the show, so it does. In the UK, my word, what is that? So much going on this morning. Honestly, we got Chinook helicopters, barges. In the UK, as I make this walk today, it has the feeling of early autumn. I mean, the sun's bright, it's coming out, it's going to be a beautiful warm day, but it's right now it's got a bit of that chill. It's like the first day of school term chill. Do you remember that one? When we all went back to school, in the UK anyway, with our new bags, new rulers, new shoes, desperately trying to scuff them on the walk so they could lose a little bit of their uncool sparkle that they have when they're new. Don't tell your parents. That's what's going on here. I think we've got that return to school chill. We've got a staggered back to school actually. Sam went back yesterday. She starts a new teaching role at a very different school. She's gone from the young uns, all starry-eyed and ready to learn, to the high school oiks, all leaning back in their chairs with their feet on the desk, acting like they're the CEO of Google or something. And I if you're listening to this on the day of release anyway, I have a week-ish to go until I start the journey to Scotland for the first week of 2 weeks of this year's Scottish retreat. I have started to pack my camera bag, oh yes, making sure I don't forget anything. Anything glaringly basic, like the jacket that I forgot last year, had to buy as soon as I arrived. But my checklist is building now, so while they head back to school, I'll be heading to Scotland with my X100V. I'm taking the X Pro 1 with vintage lens and, of course, a film camera, since that's one of the things we do. And I'm looking forward to welcoming our guests and, of course, you on the podcast, because we'll record an edition of the podcast featuring our fabulous photo walkers who come with us. We have 2 weeks of retreat this year, though I do find myself unexpectedly with a space on the second week, which came out of the blue only a few days ago. Now, unfortunately, we've lost contact with somebody who was due to attend. I don't know what's happened. So I feel I can really offer their space to you. Now, this space is for the second week, not the first. So it's the second, not the first. You have a little time to pack your clothes and your camera bag and make perfectly valid excuses to the family that you need some you time with your camera. What date is it, Neil? What date? I can hear you shouting through the ether. I am coming to that. You'll be arriving in Scotland on Sunday the 15th of September for a special welcome supper, departing a week later on Saturday the 21st. And though it's lastminute.com of sorts, I really hope to, I'm going to use this whet your appetite, if you don't mind, over the next few moments, because year on year, the week, well, they've changed slightly, the Scottish week, and this year we're going to be doing some activities that we've not done in the past. So cue the Scottish music, as Scottish as we can manage, and let me take you briefly through the week. Now, Monday, we'll meet with our darkroom guru, Matt Sillers. And whether you've shot film or not before, it's really a very inclusive experience. We learn a little about film before venturing out into the beautiful scenery of the Highlands to make some film pictures ready to process in the darkroom to produce an art print on the Tuesday. I love the darkroom day. It's blessed with as much humour as it is delight, which I shall never tire of. Making prints, seeing them come alive under the red lamp in the darkroom. It's a great group activity. It's a really fantastic bonding activity as well. We have a lot of fun those 2 days out photographing with our digital cameras too in the Scottish Highlands, making some film pictures though, so we can make that art print to take away as a memoir of the week. Wednesday, we're out on the coast and also in Woodland, actually, and I'll be leading the first retreat workshop I've led on making sound a part of your photography. We dallianced with it in the past, but this time I'll be helping those with me to get comfortable with using sound to make diary pieces, sound diary pieces, like what I do here, really. This really is that. Is something that you can go on to use on your website or Insta and so on. And in the evening, as we eat and laugh and talk together, I'll help you produce your first sound and photo story stroke diary. Thursday, we're joined by author Merrin Glover, who knows the Highlands very, very well, for a creative writing workshop. Again, another first. Much of which will be held in forestry with our cameras near to our base. Now, this is something I've not done in my life, and I'm really looking forward to working with Merrin on how I write and understand how I may improve those skills along with those who are in our group, and we'll be putting those skills that we learn to the test with pictures that we make in the afternoon as we go to an 18th century coastal town. So sound on one day and then writing on the next, alongside the pictures that we make. That's really important. And Friday, well, we're at the most beautiful loch I think we visited on our trips to Scotland, Loch Marie. I almost chose a different loch for this year, but I don't know. There's much of the loch to explore, and I guess in many ways, along with photographing and walking together, we can again put into practice all that we've discovered about ourselves during the week. I think this year is a journey of discovery, and so if you'd like to join us, for the very last place on the second week, I'll be delighted to welcome you. First come, first served. So email me stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show, or you can fill in the form on the Scotland page on the website, photowalk.show. Right, kilt and sporran safely packed for Scotland. Actually, our family on the other side, that makes them sound like something from a Star Wars movie, on the other side. Well, they have Scottish heritage. I'm not quite sure whether that gives me carte blanche to borrow or wear their tartan. Probably not, actually. But they do, you know. We have some interesting ancestry when we start to look back through it. And me being adopted and having that Irish connection as well. Look at us, hey? Whew. Right, back to your letters. What? I know, you're absolutely right. Let me give you one of these. Put the letters down, because we are approaching a part of the walk where I'm going to make a particular picture for our friend Peter Upton. Yeah, have another one of these. Early morning treats. There we go. Don't keep asking, though. Now, for the dog lovers who say, you shouldn't just give him treats upon him requesting and barking for it. You're right, but what we do is our treats are kibble, basically. So that's not quite like a first meal of the day, but it's much better than some of the fattening treats, calorific treats that you can buy. Anyway, this isn't the dog walk, this is the photo walk. And I am heading towards something that I want to photograph for Peter Upton, whose letter comes in here. Hello, Neil. I wanted to write and say thank you for all the inspiration to start a project. Back at the beginning of November, I went for a walk at our local beach and was shocked by how much the coastline and the old pillboxes had moved and changed. So I decided to start recording this beach, and I'm so glad I did. For my other listener now, a Second World War pillbox is a small fortified concrete structure used as a defensive military position, typically found next to a coastline or indeed rivers, like the one we're about to find walking up this path now, which I'll take a photograph of and pop on the show page today. We have a good view along the Kennet and Avon Canal. It was it would have provided passage between London and Bristol, or Bristol and London, and so it needed to be defended. I thought, says Peter, that this may be a project that would take many years to complete, but what I saw on my latest photo walk yesterday has changed my mind. You'll appreciate my shock when I got to the pillbox at the far end of the beach I'm familiar with to find it had collapsed. I know there's one like that on Studland Bay. I haven't been to Studland for a few years now, but it does look like it's sloping off more and more into the water. Let me put your letters down, because along the path I have found a pillbox. Come here, pups, there's a bike going by. Come here we go. Wait.
Thank you.
Morning.
Thank you.
No worries. Good boy. Yeah, so there's a structure here. This is a pillbox. Sadly, somebody's come along and graffitied all over the side of it. But this is one of those defences that actually would have been well hidden from anything coming up the river. It's obscured by reeds fairly well, but it still has a good line of sight onto the canal itself. Maybe with the passing of time, says Peter, passing so quickly, this project won't last as long as I thought. Thanks from Peter Upton. And P.S. Ages ago, you were looking for a name for the friends of the show who you feature regularly, and I never got round to sending you my idea, which was mile markers. Oh, that's a good idea, mile markers. That sounds good. I like that. I'm going to ruminate on that one. As far as your project, though, goes, Peter, there are plenty of pillboxes not being reclaimed by the sea. I'm sure you're aware of this anyway, but I've popped a link onto the show page, which takes you to the Pillbox Study Group, so you can continue your adventures with a camera. I would, with more time afforded me, Peter, certainly. Would this be another project, Neil? Yes, put it down as project number 874. I'd like to walk the length of this canal and photograph each one of the pillboxes, document them, because I think they are, like you say, I find them quite fascinating. I have actually wondered if we could be using these things, these concrete boxes, integrating them into nature walks, perhaps, because that's where many of them are. Perhaps small visitor exhibitions. I know some of them are far too small, only have room for one or two people, but some of them are reasonably large. Museumlets, as in small museum. Museumlets, if you will, I don't know. But I do see many sealed up, concrete blocks in front of or it's just being sealed up with concrete. But it's just a thought. Maybe my kids used to say, maybe they could be ice cream places, Daddy. Yes. Oh, that would be good. Anyway, This is actually a very good opportunity to introduce Gary Williams, whose project about Camden Passage, whilst we're talking about projects. Those who work in this short street in London, Camden Passage, came about after embracing, observing and talking with people on a photo tour of India, actually with none other than, get this, Martin Parr. This is definitely a two-part story. In the second part, we're going to hear about Gary's first book project, how he made his pictures for this book, why he made the pictures, the people he met, how he sequenced them together, how he chose a publisher for this, why he chose self-publishing, and what he's learned from making a book that equals the style of any that I think you might find on a bookshelf. It's busy today, isn't it? We got trains, we got planes, everything's going on. Pups, hear that? I think that's a freighty, isn't it? That's not it's not a pinstriped express. But initially in this first part, I'd like you to meet Gary, a singer, a photographer, who up to a year ago hadn't earned a dime from his photography. I think this is a wonderful story, full of enthusiasm and can-do manner. And I hope that's what this podcast is about in so many ways. Gary's an absolute joy to talk with, because he's absolutely charged with enthusiasm, as I think you'll hear. This first shorter half of our conversation really sets the scene for the book that he's produced, which I think, and I didn't suggest this to him, but I think this has become the sort of public-facing launch pad for what I hope and I think will be a very successful career making photographs. Perhaps this book is his blue kryptonite, his superpower. So for the first part of our chat then, let me introduce you to our latest friend on the show. This is Gary Williams.
Gary, I want to come on to the book, this little book of Camden Passage, to quote the title of the book, but I'd like to know more about you first. You're what I broadly refer to, and I position myself in this genre as well, of course, as you know, as a social photographer. Whether we're social or not, I don't know, but that
sociable,
sociable,
antisocial, social photographers.
I'm not sure that would be a very good genre, an antisocial social photography genre. Well, was there a calling to weddings, or did the aisle stretch out in front of you as unexpectedly as it did for me?
I think we're on the same page there. I didn't expect at all to be photographing weddings. I don't know if you know this or anybody listening knows this, but my background is in the music business as a singer. So I have spent most of my life working as a singer, and my sort of bread and butter work for many years has been singing on cruise ships. So as what's called a guest entertainer, a guest act. So I'd fly out, do a show with the band on the ship, and then fly back again. I might just be away 3, 4, 5 days or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I've done that a lot. And over the years, I've, done some interesting, gigs as well, and developed a nice, strong career. But I just got to a stage in my life where I didn't want to be away traveling to earn my crust so much. I just got to a stage where, it's been amazing and so many wonderful opportunities, and I've loved every minute of it, actually. But I wanted to be home more. And just before the pandemic hit, a friend of mine called me up and said that Martin Parr is doing a workshop in Delhi, and shall we go? And we are both huge fans of his, and he very rarely, kind of basically never does workshops. And, it was quite expensive and it was a big trip, but we thought, you know what, let's do it. It'll be sort of a bit of a trip of a lifetime. So it's not something we're going to do again. So we went out there, did that. That kind of fired up my general love of photography, which I'd always had, and I've always taken photos. I've always enjoyed cameras, but never considered doing it any more seriously than a bit of sort of occasional weekend street photography.
But you had been photographing on the ships.
No.
I don't mean as a guest photographer. I mean more as a adventure. I always had a camera with me, and something that I loved doing actually was I'd get off in port. And often I'd spend a lot of time on my own on these ships because I go on, as a solo act. And of course I know people on the ship, but, the people that I know are often working when I'm not working.
And what I loved with doing street photography is I get off in these different ports and I'd have my camera with me. And you know how you can just get really lost in that moment. And instead of just sort of wandering around, wondering where you're going to buy your next ice cream from, I'd have a camera with me. And you know that thing, when you've got a camera in your hand, it makes you really look. You're looking at the light, you're looking at the shadows, you're looking for personalities, interesting people, interesting things. You know, John Ruskin, the Victorian, he was I think he was one of the founders of the Royal Academy of Arts. Anyway, he was a Victorian artist and a sort of an everyman, really. And one of the things that he did was establish art classes for the working classes, and the sort of these classes were all over the country. And one of the things that he stressed to his students, which really resonated with me, was it's not so important how your painting, how your picture, how your drawing turns out. It's what's really important is the process, and that you're really looking at the thing. If you're drawing a picture of a leaf or a tree, I mean, just the fact that the process of that makes you sit down and really, what color is that exactly? Is it a brown leaf really? Or is there purple in there? Is there yellow in there? Is there black? Is there white? Whatever. And I love that about street photography, is that it really makes me slow down and pay attention.
So at this stage then, if I were to use a label, you were an amateur hobbyist, but certainly one who had and was developing this keen sense beyond the basics, like composition and colours that work and layering and all those sorts of things. But then there's the pandemic. Ships certainly didn't go to sea, and so to use a very clumsy analogy perhaps, you found yourself all at sea at home, but with your camera. How did you feel this time?
I spent a lot of COVID keeping myself sane by watching just about every YouTube video has ever been made on photography. And as things opened up and we were coming out of COVID, I was looking for a project. And I think we need a project, right? We need some kind of focus on, rather than just going out and say, okay, I'm going to take some pictures, go out and do some street photography today. I think it's much better if we've got some kind of idea of what we're aiming to achieve that day. So I had really enjoyed taking pictures of shopkeepers in old Delhi. And if you've ever been around those old, windy, chaotic streets, and to sort of us and our eyes, they look so interesting and so exotic. And then I came home and I thought, well, why don't I just take the same kind of pictures, but here where I live in London? Because even though they don't seem as exotic and as interesting to me, photographing my local newsagents or independent coffee shop, I mean, they are still interesting. And this is where I live, and it's sort of documenting my community. So I started doing that. And I loved that, because I loved how I was having conversations with people and actually bonding with people.
Well, it's the passport, isn't it?
You're right. That's a very good word.
And there's two words that come up as you're saying this, really. Passport, because I've always said photography is a passport to curiosity, but it's also a purpose, and that's what you were finding by doing this. That you weren't just snapping. Your photography had found a purpose. It had found shops.
Yeah. Do you know, I don't think it's actually very hard to take a decent photograph. I mean, certainly technologically, cameras do so much of the work for us. And, you know, as long as we've got half an idea what we're doing, we can take nice pictures. Of course, as you get more experienced, you know, you've got a better eye and so on. But I'm convinced that 90% of it is just doing it. It's just getting out there and doing it. And the more you're doing it, the better your photos are going to be, and the more chance you've got of getting good pictures. So I actually did a workshop myself about a month ago. It was sort of organized by the people that organized this Camden Passage exhibition, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit. And so when they asked me to take a workshop, I was like, oh God, I don't know what the hell, who am I, you know, to be teaching people? But I put this thing together. It was only an hour. So I thought I can talk about it for an hour. And what people they were most interested in, how do you stop people and take these portraits of people on the street? You know, how are you doing that? And I said, well, you just ask them. And there was, but that wasn't a good enough answer for them, right? So they would go, and they were like, well, do it, show us. And I'm like, well, I just ask them. So somebody walked by and I said, excuse me, hey, I'm Gary, I'm doing this thing. Can I take your photograph? And they said yes. And I took their picture and off they went on the way. And it was the same with Martin. You know, wasn't anything difficult or mysterious. He's just a guy with a camera and sees something he likes and he just stops and asks them, or not, you know. But if he didn't ask them, he got in and out there quick. But if he wasn't asking people, he would just take his picture and move on. He would just take one picture and move on. But if he was asking, he'd just ask and take his picture. I mean, it wasn't any sort of mystery to it. Of course, he's got a wealth of experience, so he knows where they're placed anyway. He's obviously got a great load of experience to draw on. So the chances are his pictures are going to look better than mine. But I think so much of it is just the doing of it.
Well, the international language of a smile as well. I remember watching Don McCullin work on a video about, he was in India as well. I can't remember what part of India he was in, but watching him glide along streets, and he would dance and he would duck and dive a little bit, and excuse me, and he'd motion, and he'd smile, and the photographs would come. I think I was left thinking, oh, I was expecting so much more.
Right, because you see the work and the photos are amazing. But I think that's it. Just a smile, just and I've always been reasonably personable with people, so that helps. I like people. That's why I gravitate towards that kind of photography where I am interacting with people. I enjoy that. But just being nice, not being weird. I'd rather do that than sort of skulking around a corner waiting for someone to, walk around the corner with a red balloon because it's going to match the poster that they're going to be walking in front of and the sun's just right. I like approaching people and having a little chat with them. I'm comfortable with that, but it's not for everybody, right? Some people would be more comfortable taking pictures of the shadows and the shapes coming from the buildings, in late afternoon. And that's also great.
We will come on to the book in a moment. That's the reason we're talking. But I do want to get a handle on your... you've effectively not completely changed careers because you're still singing. You mentioned you were at Ronnie Scott's. That's a great claim to fame, just to be able to sneak that one in. I was at Ronnie's.
Just got that one in for you. Ronnie Scott's and Martin Parr in the same sentence.
I know. I don't know. I'll ever have another guest that managed to sneak in Ronnie Scott's, Martin Parr, and them singing on stage at the same time. But I
didn't do a duet. Just to be clear,
no, you wasn't a duet
with Martin Parr.
Well, do you know what that would be even better if you could possibly arrange that?
Yeah, then next time.
I'd like to come and photograph that. The wedding business then, and moving careers or pivoting, as that new word became, or that word we became more aware of during the pandemic. Is that what's happened more recently then, that you've pivoted to embrace photography as your as a way of earning money as well, whereas before when you were on the boats it wasn't?
Exactly.
Right.
It was only... Let me think. It was only January last year that I got paid money for taking pictures. And I thought, well, what can I do? What kind of photography can I do? And I decided I was going to do headshot photography. I got a good sized room in my house, which I turned into a little studio, studied that just really on YouTube. And I started to hire models. I didn't have to pay them very much because they were getting pictures and I was getting to practice. And it was on the clear understanding, look, I'm going to be faffing around. You're just going to have to stand there while I figure out what I'm doing with these lights and so on, And while that was happening, I got this gig. And I should say what's quite interesting is that this kind of community work that I've been doing, photographing shopkeepers, and we'll move on to Camden Passage in a minute, but that project took me to this one little street called Camden Passage. So I was taking a lot of photographs in that street and people got to know me. And as an aside from that, the first paid work that I got came from doing the free work. I call it community work, right? And so I wasn't doing the community work because I could get paid. It was going to lead to me getting money, but that was definitely one of the things that came about from that, which is kind of makes sense, right? Because there's a lot of businesses, a lot of people, and at some point you're going to meet somebody that says, oh, well, I need a photographer. Can you help us with this? Right? And so, that's how that came about. And so I started to get paid. Then I started to get paid for doing headshots and portraits, and that was going all right. That was doing quite well. Obviously, it takes time to establish that kind of business, and I was enjoying it, and it was working. I was getting established. And then I started to think to myself, you know what, I'm not sure how long this is going to last, because this is at a time when everybody was posting on social media pictures of themselves, in a spacesuit or riding a polar bear's back in Alaska or something.
I must have missed that bit. I wasn't doing that.
Well, all AI'd, so you don't get too excited. But I thought, if AI, an app, is doing this, it can't be so hard for someone to take a few selfies with their phone and for the AI to make it look like a decent business LinkedIn headshot.
Yeah.
Right. Of course, there's always going to be a market for people that don't want to use apps and that want, there's only so much you can do, right? But at that kind of lower end of the market, I think this could be a problem for me. The kind of clients that I'm getting now, they just want to save money. So I decided I needed, I was thinking, what can I do to earn money and still be a photographer? And the obvious thing was wedding photography. But interestingly, and I don't know if you or any of your listeners have found this, but all my friends, my photography friends, were really in the sort of street photography genre. They weren't getting paid for it, but they were very good at it, some of them, and they loved doing it. They were passionate about it. Everybody was like, "Oh God, don't do weddings. That's how awful." They said, "You're going to hate it. It's going to be a night. All these awful clients. You're going to hate doing it for a start." And also, they just talked about it like I was just selling my soul. How can you be an artist and doing wedding photography? And I instantly really recognized this kind of ignorance and snobbery from my work as a singer, from my work on cruise ships, particularly because if you looked at my bio, or if I was talking to somebody, if I was sort of name dropping some of the things that I did, and you say, "Oh, okay, I've done Carnegie Hall or the Royal Albert Hall, or I've sung at Abbey Road Studios in Frank Sinatra's home," or all these things, I know that they sound impressive. And then the minute I would mention to somebody that I did cruise ships, their impression of me and where I am as a singer will completely change, right? Because they would think, "Oh, wow, you sung at Carnegie Hall. That's impressive. Oh, you sing on cruise ships. Isn't that just like, well, crooners go to die?" And this awful image that some people still have of that kind of work, which is completely based in ignorance, right? But it's there.
It seems to me then that having that comparison laid before your feet, you thought, well, to hell with you then. I'm going to become a wedding photographer. I'll do it proudly and loudly. Thank you very much.
Very much that, because I hate that kind of snobbery. I hate it. And wherever I see that kind of stuff, it really triggers me. And I thought, okay, well, I've seen this attitude before. And actually, I've gone on to realize so many things that I've learned from my work as a singer in the music business apply very much to photography, particularly wedding photography. And I just fell in love with it because I thought because I love doing street photography. I love taking portraits of people. This is sort of combined. I love the work of Martin Parr. And, those times there's a cocktail hour, whatever, I can walk around just practicing and playing and just, I've got license. I don't have to, as a street photographer, I don't have to worry about that thing of sort of skulking around and being a bit weird. I'm paid to do exactly that.
Well, people are expecting you to make pictures.
Exactly.
If you're standing in the corner not doing it, they may well say, "Aren't you supposed to be taking pictures?"
Exactly, right.
Get on with it.
And we're getting paid for it. And so for me, I just thought, well, this is what an opportunity. I'm now getting paid to do the thing that I love. And as you say, it's expected of me to be going round sort of, as you say, this using the camera as a passport to sort of, elbow my way in, literally, into sort of little circles of people having conversations and just start taking photos of them, and taking weird or interesting pictures as well as the obvious ones. And I still think it's just an incredible opportunity. So it sort of really seems to combine all of the kinds of photography that I love to do.
And Gary Williams returns shortly to tell us more about his fascination for Camden Passage. But in the second part, it's more about this. Well, I'm calling it a career-launching book. I'm sure he probably doesn't call it that, but it feels like that to me. It feels that important. And he's going to share the sequencing and a little more of the maybe the technical details of how he went about the whole process. If you'd like to send some pictures and stories of your photography in, then I'd love to hear from you. stories@photowalk.show is the email address, stories@photowalk.show. Just I wanted to add on something I was mentioning Scotland earlier, and hang on, before I make that picture, or rather before I tell you that piece I wanted to which I've just thought about, which I wanted to tell you about Scotland, I want to make a photograph back along the path, one of my sketchbook pictures. It's just because it's bathed in sunshine. There we go, 4.5, f4.5, and 160 ISO, 1300 shutter speed. There we go. Oh, the cloud moves so quickly. That lovely sunshine that was illuminating the path it's gone overcast. Look at that little cloud just popping itself in front of the sun. Yes, Scotland. I forgot to mention this. All you have to do is arrive in Scotland. We'll do the rest. We feed you, we drive you around, everything's included, and all you have to do is get yourself to Inverness. Again, if you'd like to come with us and grab that very last place, then go to the show page for Scotland, which is on the website, photowalk.show. There's a form there, all costs, etc. attached, or send me an email to stories@photowalk.show. Let's return to the mailbag, shall we? This is one from Chris Hughes. This one is from June, hence the solstice mention that's slightly out of sync with today's date. Neil, thanks for the inspirational interviews each week. I know that I'm inspired week on week from the variety and integrity of the photographers you talk to. I like that word. I love hearing Sir Barkalot making commentary on the quality of the stick or the stone that you select for him. His commentary doesn't need subtitles to get clarity in what he's thinking. I think you're right there, actually. Winter solstice is over here in Australia land. In Melbourne, that means 0 degrees or thereabouts, so my fingerless gloves are struggling to keep my shutter finger warm enough to push the button. 0? Are you sure? 0 degrees in Melbourne? Australia? Are we talking about the same place? Having recommenced my work role, my daily walks have an earlier start, so light can be a bit of a challenge. In these times, I resort to the quick grabs and grain of Daidō Moriyama. It's a bit dark and a bit sinister, Neil, but hey, that's what these cold winter mornings feel like. 5 pictures are on the show page today that Chris sent in. They're titled Solitude, Lottery Winner, Negative Space, Early Morning Light, and Gum Tree. You'll see them. You'll know which ones are which. They're on the show page. Cheers from Chris Hughes in Melbourne land. Sunnier times, Chris, I think lay ahead for you. If you're unfamiliar with Daidō Moriyama, I'll leave a link on the show page to his work. He's a Japanese photographer, renowned for his gritty, as Chris pointed out as well, grainy, and often, or should I say always, high contrast black and white images that capture this sort of raw energy, this chaos of urban life. And if you look him up, you'll quickly see that the themes of his work are feelings of alienation and how fleeting life can be. Blimey, Neil, I'm just settling into the day with a coffee. I know, but I promise you, this work is worth taking a longer linger over. Much of it, I hope I've not got this wrong, much of it is produced, I think, with a compact camera. Am I right on that? That's Daidō Moriyama with a compact camera, isn't it? I probably best go look that up. This researcher, pups, don't roll in that, please. This researcher for the show, do you think they could possibly follow me along the path? A bit like a modern-day fact-checker. I think that might be a good idea, but I'm pretty certain that the work is produced through a compact camera. It's remarkable work, it really is. Very gritty, very grainy, as I say. Here's, this is a nice sketchbook picture. I'm going to take it quickly because that cloud is approaching again. I got caught out by it last time, but I do like light when it just tickles things like vegetation. This is nettles by a tree, and there's a wonderful texture to the tree as well. Let me have a quick look at that on the back of the camera. I don't often do that actually while I'm making my sketchbook photographs. Yeah. It might be a mere picture, I don't know. I could really do maybe with the nettles being isolated a little bit more. They might be too bright. I'm trying to embrace my inner Daidō Moriyama here. You see, that's what I'm trying to do. Now, if you could help me, please, I would be very grateful. On the show page, there are some handy buttons that help you share the show. They're underneath the player. But also be sure to press the subscribe button on the podcast app so you can be sure to know when a new episode is coming out. But sharing the show really helps us grow this community. And that can also be done by just, popping into Facebook groups or on Instagram and saying, "Oh, I've heard this podcast. That's if you feel you want to share," he says, quickly recalling with his English sensitivities. But if you can help share the show, that would really help us to keep building our community and keep us here, walking week on week. 2 things to do now. We've got the shutter sync to do, and then I'll remind you, because you've only got 1 more week to get the pictures in for this month's assignment. Again, I'm walking along the path. It's going to be a similar kind of shot to last week when I make my shutter sync. Shutter sync, or synchronization, is all about making a photograph together, you and me, where we are at the time you're listening to this podcast. So we get an idea of where and how you listen to the show. I'll give you a countdown from 3 to 1, so start to ready your camera. As I say each week, smartphones are included. I'm not quite sure how much longer we're going to do this feature. We dipped in and out the first time that we did it. Pups, don't go in there. No. Oh, no. He's just gone in the really muddy, creaky thing that Oh, look, he's come out with what look like dark brown boots on. You are so showering. You are. Just earned yourself a shower. Yeah, we sort of... the last time we did it, I think we did it for about 6, 7, 8 weeks, and then we took a rest and we've come back to it again. I don't know. We'll see how many photographs keep coming in for it. So it's shutter sync. I'm going to go from 3 to 1 and then click my camera. You take a picture, then send it in, please, to stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. If you want to tell me a little bit about it as well, I can overlay some text onto the picture of where you are. I can't do links on that one, but I can say where the picture was taken. So here we go. I've got my camera. I pointed it along the towpath, along this Kennet and Avon Canal that I so love. 3, 2, 1, and that is shutter sync from me and from you, and I look forward to seeing where you are as you're listening to the show. Right, the assignment this month. Emily Renier set the challenge for this month, and you have 1 more week to join in. I promise I'm going to announce the winners of the last few of these photo assignments that we've had. So 1 more week to join in with this one. Emily, what is the 1-word challenge for the month of August?
The Photo Walk assignment.
My 1 word is going to be energy, and I probably go for energy because whenever I get really good feedback from a bride or from a mum or a dad, it's usually because they love the energy in my pictures. And it's also a good word because it makes you work hard at your frames and what you include in a frame, what you decide to leave out. So it makes you think about composition, about movement, and about emotion, but all in one way. So energy. Emily Renier setting our challenge. Good luck with that. Send your pictures into stories. Come on, pups, at photowalk.show.
Stories@photowalk.show. Now, Emily is one of the first guests, I think 2nd week actually, into September on my new podcast, which starts on this coming Tuesday, called 1000 Weddings. I got to 1000 weddings across 20 years and I thought, do you know what? I think I might just have some knowledge to share about this genre now, but I wanted to make a podcast that was I think applicable to, not in all cases, of course, because we'll talk about weddings. Clearly, it's a wedding podcast, but I wanted it to be a listen that would be applicable to other forms of photography as well. So it will be about more about the why than the how. Although we do touch on the how with this particular one. We have a guest a week and other features within it, such as, there's a story of the completely unexpected, stuff what goes wrong at weddings, and there's other features as well. And eventually we'll have a mailbag that applies to that particular programme as well. And it does start, well, my plan is, at this point anyway, it does start with what I'm calling field notes. So there's almost like a photo walky kind of feel to the very start of the show. And Emily is our second guest, that's right. And it all starts this coming Tuesday. 1,000 Weddings, available wherever you get your podcasts. It's the photo walk of a Friday. Me with my camera and letters, you with your camera, your thoughts, and do keep sending them in, because this show is all about the mailbag. Cue the song. It's all about your letters. It's wonderful to hear from you, to hear where you're photographing the world, what you've been doing, any thoughts you have. You can send pictures. I always love receiving those pictures. If you can send them to stories@photowalk.show, resized to 2,500 pixels wide. That's fantastic. If not, don't worry. Send them full resolution and I will do the heavy lifting. But also the poems. I was going to leave the poems off, but I quite liked it the last few weeks when we've been able to do it. So if you have any poems for the path as well, embrace your inner poet and let us have those. They don't have to be long. They can be shorter ones. I've mentioned haiku, of course, which is not a long form of poetry. And any thoughts you have that don't come with pictures about what photography means to you in terms of mental health. It's a subject on this show that we do not shy from. I think it's a really, really important one. Right, a letter from our good friend Harriet Langridge, who wrote in after that week we did about street photography, which will feature as a link on the show page today. And it fits, of course, with the theme of this week's show in terms of my conversation with Gary Williams, who you will hear more from in a moment. I've been thinking, says Harriet, careful now, about street and some thoughts really about photographing strangers. I think there is a difference between photographing street scenes which happen to have people in them and street portrait photography. In my opinion, the second, the street portrait photography, should really be done with a cooperation of the model, if you like. But the first, you don't need to. I do ask people when I feel confident enough if I can make their portrait, but I've missed out when I don't, I'm sure. I also think that if I'm walking around with a camera, I don't necessarily blend in. So I personally prefer to shoot street with a smaller film camera. Anyway, here's a picture I took of a guy we met in a fabulous pub in a place called Barnstable, and you'll find this on the show page today, who we got talking to whilst enjoying a nice pint of real ale brewed on the premises. Sounds fabulous to me. Arguably, you could say that the beer gave me the confidence. But when I asked, well, he didn't hesitate to say yes. I also loved the sign on the door next to him. I tell you what, rather than tell you what the sign says, you can see it on the show page for yourself. Go to photowalk.show, today's episode, and there'll be Harriet's picture there with the chap and the beer and the sign. My feelings, says Harriet, no. Do photography your own way. Feel comfortable doing it your way. And don't worry unnecessarily about the pictures that you miss. Thanks from Harriet Langridge. There was a photographer, Harriet, whose workshop I attended many, many, many years ago, who said, with regard the pictures you miss in life, and yes, you might consider this a bit bold from the photographer in question, but he said, if I didn't get it, well, it didn't happen. And I thought at the time, I'm going to use the B word, not the A word. That's a bit bold. But actually, he was right, you know. You can't knock yourself about for not, metaphorically that is, for not getting a picture. If you didn't see it, it didn't happen. That's one way to look at it. But if you didn't get it, don't worry. There'll always be another opportunity. So don't worry about the pictures you miss. Celebrate the ones that you get. I'll pop the picture on the show page, as I said today. It'll be there. And since we're talking street, I don't just throw this stuff together, you know. Let me bring back Gary Williams for the second part of my interview today to talk about, well, self-publishing in this second half of our conversation.
Camden Passage. It's actually, even though you're a Londoner, I feel like I should go into a song now, but I wouldn't offend you with my voice. But being a Londoner, you weren't too aware of Camden Passage, North 1, were you? I don't think you'd spent, from what I'm garnering, it wasn't somewhere you knew too well.
Well, I'm a Londoner, but I'm from Grimsby. So right. I have lived in London for 20-odd years, which I suppose that I can call myself a Londoner now. But I have lived in the same place for most of that time.
Right.
And to walk to Camden Passage, which we should say isn't in Camden, it's near Angel Tube.
Yes.
And to walk to Camden Passage from my home would take about 20 minutes. I knew of it. I'd been in it, down it before, but it's not somewhere that was really on my radar a lot. And it was when I started taking the photographs of shopkeepers near my home, and I was working. So there's this street between me and Camden Passage called Upper Street in Islington. It's a great street. There's full of independent shops and restaurants and cafes. A lot of people come from other parts of London just to go out and enjoy the hospitality industry and around there and what it offers. So I was slowly working my way down Upper Street, taking photographs, and I ended up at Camden Passage, which is a very small street, which is almost all independent shops. It's very charming. It's instantly very charming. Yeah. There's a lot of history there. It has an antiques market there 2 or 3 days a week. And it just seemed like the obvious place for me to settle down and spend some time. Mm. And going back to India, I think there's a thing with us photographers, isn't there, that to take interesting photos, we need to go to interesting places. We need to go far away. Mm. And there's the thing that I was alluding to before, I'm taking pictures of shopkeepers in India. Well, to people from India, those shopkeepers aren't very interesting at all, right? It's just because to us, to our eyes, they're interesting because it's different. Yeah. And sometimes we feel as though we're to get good pictures. And it just seems like easy pickings, doesn't it? It's just like, wow, look at that. It's just so different. But I realized we don't have to travel far at all. And I really focused my efforts on this very little street. And I spent about 4 years there and took about 6,000 photos on this little street, because I realized that the more time I spent there, the more I was sort of drilling down and finding more. It's like enhancing or zooming in on a microscope and then zooming in more and zooming in more. And to me, that was a revelation. And when people would say to friends, hey, shall we go and do some street photography somewhere else? Or do you want to come on this workshop? I would say, well, do you know, I've just got my hands full. Like all the time I've got for this is just full of in Camden. I can't get enough of it. And sometimes I was spending hours and hours there. But it was just the more I spent there, the more there was to photograph. And part of that is building relationships with people, because you can't, some of the pictures that are in there's one in particular, it's one of the few double page spreads in the book of a lady called Annie from a shop, Annie's Vintage. And anybody that knows this street would know that this vintage shop had been there for, I don't know how long, I'm going to say decades. It was just sort of part of Camden Passage. It was a famous sort of landmark destination in this little street. And the shop, for those obvious cliche reasons of rents going up and so on, was closing. And I'd photographed Annie a lot, as a lot of other street photographers had, because it's such a great shop. So you go in and people say, and she was used to having a picture taken. She'd smile and let you take a picture and then you'd move on. But I got to know her well and we became friends. And it was important to me that the relationship was strong enough so that on the day that she was closing the shop, I knew it was closing, of course, actually, I was in the shop with her, when all the hustle bustle had finished and the movers had gone and there's just a few things sort of scattered on the floor and there's just her sitting the only chair that's left in there. And it's literally an hour before she's going to hand the keys back. she trusted me enough to be with her at that moment. And I got this photograph, which still, makes me feel quite emotional to see it, because she's looking a little bit lost from all the usual smiley, happy pictures that she'd had taken over the years. And it captured a real moment. And I couldn't have taken that picture had I just gone in there on the fly. She would have, it just wouldn't have happened, right? So that's an example of the kind of photo that I was allowed to take. And also with the market traders, a lot of the market traders, again, they're used to street photographers, or just people, with their iPhone, because the stores look really interesting and the people look really interesting. So everybody wants to take their pictures. In my experience, the market traders aren't so keen on that. They don't like people, these random people coming in and taking their pictures. And so they don't let them. There's no photos allowed. You can imagine how long it took me. I mean, it took literally years for some of these people to allow me to take their photograph.
Yeah. Did they know your name then? By a certain stage, it would be, there's Gary. Oh, how you doing,
exactly.
Gary? You okay?
Exactly.
But even then, you weren't necessarily going to say, now I've got your attention. Can I make your picture? I think you probably were continuing to build these relationships, weren't you? The
that
time
is so
that we're
true.
spending
And I have
together.
to tell you, I lived here for 20 years.
Yeah.
And doing this project, I've never felt so close and so connected to my community. I now feel a part of this community in a way I have not done before. Yeah. And that's because, what London's like, and it's busy, and it's very transient, and of course I know people, and I see, I've got my friends, it's so big, London, that most of my friends don't live in my street or that close to me. And, I know the people that in the local stores or in the coffee shop, but even then it's just a kind of, hi, how you doing? And, they've seen me for years, and it's very kind of a transactional relationship. Yeah. But going into Camden Passage and spending all of that time with these people and genuinely enjoying it, I think that's the thing, isn't it? All of this stuff has to come from the right place. If you're looking to, I'm doing this because I want to get some killer pictures, or I'm going to make a book, or I'm going to get an exhibition out of this, or I'm going to win some awards, or I'm going to get some clients. It never works. It's just not the approach, right? So you doing a podcast, you're not doing it because you want to be rich and famous, because you're already rich and famous. Neil, we know that.
I think you're reading
already achieved the great heights.
You're reading the wrong papers, I think.
You know what I mean? We have to, we're artists. We have to do these things because we love them, right? And I think actually, not even if you're not an artist, just starting a business, whatever it is you're doing, if you're privileged enough to be able to do it because you love it, if you love it, other things with a bit of luck will follow. That I was very aware from a selfish point of view that one of the huge things I was getting out of this, because bear in mind, when I first started doing it, I was right at the beginning of my photography career, as it were. Yeah. And I always say that Camden Passage was my university. I didn't go to, study university, study photography at university.
Yeah.
And doing it so often in that little street, why that was so important is because I knew where the light was going to be. I know that street so well. I know where the light's going to be at certain times of the day. I know where the best places are. And I slowly learned that by just doing it, right? And I was getting free models, real people in real environments to practice.
Well, Camden Passage became your playground in that respect. At what stage, though? And I can see the engagement and we, of course, will leave a link to your book on the show page today, but the engagement that I can see that you have with people here is wonderful. And I've been very, very careful about using a particular C word since the pandemic, and that's the word contagious. There's a contagious feeling in here of engagement and pleasure in spending time with people, and I think that comes across very clearly. But I'm intrigued to know at what stage you thought, hang about, Gary, I've got a book in this.
It's a really good question, and I certainly didn't do it thinking I had a book in it or there was going to be an exhibition or anything like that. What happened was I started an Instagram page just for this project called This Is Camden Passage. And so, the work was being seen there and people were enjoying it. And that for me was enough. But again, going back to Martin Parr, I'm a member of the Martin Parr Foundation. And I saw that a guy called Adrian Tyler, who I didn't know until I went on his workshop, was doing a one-day workshop on bookmaking. And I thought, well, that'd be interesting. That'd be nice. So I went along, and one of Adrian's things, you can imagine, for doing this day workshop, it's not very long, but he wanted everybody to have the satisfaction of taking something kind of tangible away from this one-day workshop, right? And so he asked us to bring in some 6x4s of our work, and he sort of talked us through the process of putting a book together. And knowing that was going to happen, I actually printed off my favorite, about 120. Adrian didn't see all those, that he would have died. But I printed off about 120 pictures that I thought were the strongest pictures of this work. And as I say, it was about 5,800 pictures that I'd taken. And I took along whatever, like 30 odd of those pictures. And by the end of this day, Adrian helped me edit those and put together this little book. And it was a little book. We sort of cut paper out, we stuck the pictures into, card, and we made a little book. And it was then that I first thought, oh, look at this. This is like a thing. This is like just the fact that it was a tangible thing that I could hold. And flicking through this book, I thought, this is really nice. These pictures look really nice in this little book. And it was completely different actually to how the book looks now, but it was a start. And Adrian was very enthusiastic about the work, and no one had really seen it like that. No other professional photographer had really looked at it as any kind of a body of work. And of course, people are always nice and they're encouraging, but I thought, I actually think he does like it, So I thought maybe this can be a thing. So what I did, I went back home, and those 120 odd pictures that I'd printed off, I spread all over my living room floor so nobody could go in the living room. And I became fascinated then with this other skill of not just taking photos, but of sequencing photos for a photo book. And I don't know about you, Neil, but I look at photo books and I would always look at them and enjoy them as just a casual viewer. I wouldn't be analyzing, why did they put that photo next to that photo? I just enjoy going through the book. But now I did, and I was beginning to understand the importance of sequencing in photographs. And suddenly there was this whole new world. It's like it's like a skill set to take the pictures, and then it's a completely different thing to put them together in a way that's engaging in a book. And I found that really thrilling and fascinating and interesting. So then I was taking all of my photo books off the shelf and actually going through them from cover to cover. And I would actually have this sort of morning routine that happened. I'd set a timer, a 30-minute timer. So one of the first things I do when I get up, make myself a cup of tea, check a few emails, then sit down, set a timer for 30 minutes to read photo books. And 30 minutes isn't very long, but it's amazing how much after a week or 2 or 3 and a few months you can get through with 30 minutes, turn everything off and just focus on that.
Well, that studying certainly worked, because what I see through the sequencing of your own pictures in this, your first book, is a very mature knowledge in terms of pictures that work together that may have been somewhat disparate when taken months, maybe years apart, but now coexist alongside each other because of clothing and colour, expression, theme, sensitivities. I don't know what books you were reading, but you learned a lot from them.
Well, thank you. And I have to tell you, that was so much fun. It was so much fun putting that together, because with so many pictures and just think, and sort of trying to tell a bit of a story and take people. And now what happened next, if you want to know this journey of me putting, from taking the pictures to putting it together, then I booked myself in, I can't remember who it was now, but there's one of the Format. Is it called Format? I think it was organised through Shutter Hub. The Format Festival, maybe. There was this festival where it's basically all about organising portfolio reviews. And I booked myself. You pay for them. They're not very expensive, but I paid for something like 8 or more. Maybe it was more. Maybe it's 10. It was a lot. Portfolio reviews over the space of 2 days, I think it was. And I thought, I'm just going to use these portfolio, because they say just show us like 10 pictures or something, 12 pictures. And I thought, well, I'm going to use this portfolio review as an opportunity to show these professional, highly respected photographers what they think of how I've got. So my sequencing of this book. And so instead of showing them like 12 pictures, I was a bit cheeky, and I'd have the PDF of the whole book sequenced there. And I'd say to them, look, I don't expect you to analyze each picture. I know we've only got like 15 minutes or whatever it was, 20, half an hour, but just, have a look through and just give me an idea of your thoughts, some feedback on the draft of this. You know what was interesting? No consistency whatsoever. I'd sit down with one highly respected, wonderful, accomplished photographer who makes books for a living or puts stuff in galleries for a living, and they'd say, well, I love this. I love what you've done here. Don't like that. The next photographer, I don't like that, but I love what you've done there. There's no consistency at all, which is another thing I'd learned from my work as a singer, that when I used to do albums and I'd say to people that I respected, what do you think about this? And they'd say, don't like that track. You definitely cut that. Make that one the first track. Say, oh, okay, I'll do that. Then you ask somebody else and they tell you something completely different,
the opposite, Yeah.
The opposite. And then you just realize after a while, you know what, I'm going to take on a little, their input. I'm going to take some things from what they say, but the actual final decisions, I'm just going to have to do what I think, what feels right, because I realize that there's some rules that you perhaps ought to follow, but really at the end of the day, it's so subjective. Yeah. It's so subjective. And just because you might make a book in a certain way and another person might make it in another way, it's like, well, it's my book. So I, without wanting to sound sort of egotistical, it's sort of, okay, I'm going to try and absorb as much of your knowledge and your advice as I can. But these decisions, really, there's 100 ways of doing it. So I'll just do what I think is right.
So you have the pictures. You've a pretty good idea of sequence. How did you choose where to publish your book? I've used, for example, Blurb, which I like very much, but you chose a company that offered you, I'm being cautious how I say this, but a more refined finish. Certainly when it comes to the cover, somebody who could, for example, foil the title on the cover.
Well, I used Blurb, and at the time I was also using Mixam, and I use Mixam quite a lot, which is a similar thing to Blurb.
Yes.
And when I got, and it's so cheap, just to get one, man, the book's about 100 pages and it's so cheap. It's remarkable, isn't it, how they do it, Yeah. So I made a draft with a cover that was color, one of the pictures and all the pages inside. And to get that printed, I mean, I'm guessing, but maybe 20 or 30 quid or something, which, for basically the finished thing, but a one-off it's quite remarkable that you can do that. So I was using them and I was trying different, and again, I'm talking to different photographer friends and showing them the book and they're handling their turn. They're giving me feedback because I feel I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just sort of figuring it out and there's lots of ways of doing it. So I made about 4 or 5 drafts with Mixam, so with a company like Blurb. But who was the best thing to happen to me with this book was to go to the Photo Book Cafe and work with a fella called Matthew Martin. Now, the Photo Book Cafe, I have to be honest, I never even knew existed until I started doing some research.
I only found out about this Photo Book Cafe from Gabriele Matola about 4 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
So I'm new to it.
Now it's on your radar, right?
Yeah. And you're bringing it further onto that radar.
For anybody who is visiting London or lives in London, the Photo Book Cafe is in Shoreditch, which is not far from where I live. And it is a wonderful, wonderful place. I mean, what's great about it is because it's just a great cafe in its own right. So it's not relying on nerdy photographers, to sort of sustain it, right? Because there are normal people that go there and just enjoy a bit of carrot cake or a panini and sandwiches. It's a great location. So it's its business model is great because it's not relying on this sort of niche market. It's a good, great, popular cafe spot, but it's also a photo book cafe in that it has this amazing library of photo books that you can just go in, the likes of you and I would go in and just ooh and ah at this huge library of photo books that it's got, and you can get one off the shelf and enjoy looking at that and studying it while you have your panini, right? Wiping your hands carefully afterwards, of course, Neil. And they do different workshops and classes and stuff. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to talk to the people there. So I started talking with Matt Martin, who's one of the people that runs the place. And I said, look, can you help me out? I don't know if you normally do this, but you edit books. That they do publish books themselves. You know how to do this. I'm not asking you to publish the book for me. I just need some help. I just need to know if what I'm doing is right. Because I got my instincts, but I'm nervous, right? I'm a bit insecure. I'm just going to make a mess of this. So he said, sure. So I was paying him very reasonable amount by the hour to go in because I needed kind of an editor, really. But I didn't want to pay somebody, $2,000 and say, here's my project. Can you edit that for me? Because I wanted to be involved in it and use it as a learning process. So he said yes. And he gave me a lot of confidence in the choices that I'd made. And I also really liked the ideas that he had in changing it because I felt that he knew what he was doing and he knew, we could work on it together. So when he'd say, well, I'm not, have you thought about putting this with that or moving that one there? And I'd say, well, why? And he would explain his rationale for that. And either I liked it or I didn't, right? I didn't have to do anything he said. But some of the great advice that he had was with the printing and the publishing and the cover. And instead of doing the obvious thing of putting one of my favorite pictures on the cover, he said, well, why don't you not have a picture? Why don't you have just a bold, kind of more plain cover? And then he suggested, having it cloth bound, and maybe with foil printing. And we were looking at the Hoxton mini press books because I'd asked. I mean, I reached out to a few publishers and nobody was interested. A few people got back to me. Hoxton didn't get back to me. And I had such low expectations, right, that anybody would say. I mean, the publishers aren't sitting there thinking, oh, if only some photographer would send us their book, because we'd love to publish a photography book of London photography, right? No one's sitting there waiting for me to send them my proofs, right? And I didn't expect, but I tried, right? I tried getting people interested. Nobody was interested. So I thought, okay, that's fine. I'll do it myself. But it seemed to me this was just the kind of book that Hoxton might publish. So we looked at their books and the way that they were doing it. And we used particularly one of their books called The London Mile as a bit of a template. Yeah. And particularly as a lot of their books are cloth covered. So we decided that's the way we were going to do it. And Matt suggested, he came up with a bit of simple artwork for it, which we later refined. And then he suggested a different printers called XYZ.
Yes.
Or maybe XYZ. I think it's XYZ. I think it's XYZ.
I think people say XYZ.
You know the publishers?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. So he suggested them. I reached out to them. They were lovely, very supportive. And again, I paid those guys just a little bit extra. They were super and they were lovely. I said, just do me a favor, because I'm a big believer in paying people for what they do for you. You know, it's just out of respect, right, for other people's time. And I said, just do me a favor. I'm going to send this thing to you. You publish these kind of books all the time. You know what you're doing with this. I'm going to send it to you. And rather than you just saying, okay, there's the PDF, slap it on the press and we'll do it. So can you just take half an hour just to look at it and just give me some feedback? If you think that the color that I've chosen for the foil printing on the front or the whatever, just give me some feedback. Help me out here, you know, as a friend might do.
Yes, yeah.
And they were happy. They made some suggestions of exactly the color of, you know, the colors of the cover and the cloth and so on. And I was worried about, because it's, you know, if you get these things, it got stitched, the price really goes up, as opposed to just being sort of, there's a name for it, but I think it's perfect binding. As it turns out, isn't that perfect, because the spines can break, but I think they call it perfect binding, where it's just glued together. And I was worried that, you know, is that going to be good enough? I didn't want it to be like, you know, one of these cheap sort of zines that's glued and it snaps, you know, the binding snaps after the first time. Anyway, I took their advice, got an ISBN code, you know, and a barcode, stuck that in there. And you can imagine my nerves, Neil, when it came back. And yes, that was a really exciting, thrilling, but terrifying moment as you unbox them, having put so much time and so much work into it. But I was really happy. I was really thrilled with the result. And it just felt like a proper book. It felt like something. And one of my proudest moments, because I think often you're so busy in this process, you don't often really have a moment to sort of step back and say, wow, look what I did. I'm really happy with this. You know, because you just sort of, by the time that moment should come, you're sort of kind of over it because you put all the work in. But I remember seeing the book in one of the shops in Camden Passage, and they had it proudly displayed in the window. And I really had a moment then, because it just looked like a proper book. You know, it looked like something that people might actually buy.
Well, looking through the book, it's a wonderful example of how passion becomes project, becomes published. And I really do see through the eyes of those that you photographed this engagement through your encounters, and that's magical. Now, usually at this point, to close, I ask my question of why, you know, why do you do photography? But I think you've continually answered that through the threads of your replies over the course of our conversation. So I'm going to ask a slightly nuanced version of, and that is, what do you think you've learned about yourself, Gary, through photographing, designing and publishing this very first beautifully composed, in every sense of the word, book?
I've learned that I'm more patient than I thought I was. I mean, people that know me, I can be quite an impatient person, but this whole thing has required patience, not just because the whole process has taken 4 years, but just in building those relationships with people, patience with myself, in allowing myself to make mistakes and learn from them. And actually the joy of this thing taking time and enjoying the process, rather than it being another thing on my to-do list that I have to check off because I'm really busy and really important. It's been a real pleasure to take time and enjoy the process. And
my thanks to Gary Williams, sincerely, for well, his enthusiasm as much as anything. That was, I really enjoyed our conversation, Gary. I truly did. And I suggested to him that one day we meet up. Perhaps this is going to be a winter thing. I think we meet up and go for a photo walk along, you guessed it, Camden Passage. And that's it for today. If you can't wait until next Friday and want to walk a little bit further with us, then the Extra Mile edition, number 103, is waiting for you. The Extra Mile is part of our private Patreon channel, supported by our wonderful community, who we call Extra Milers each week. It's an extra show, which often features our community as the stars of the show. And actually, that's what we're doing this week. I wasn't sure what to call this one. A walk on the wild side was one idea I had, because we talk about travelling with your cameras, going on expedition to places that aren't necessarily on the usual advertised travel trail. And we talk with our friend, Lynn Fraser.
On this week's Extra Mile.
Well, actually, even landing in the airport was an experience. It's a tiny little airport, and as we flew in, I could see 6 army helicopters lined up, and then a bit further down the runway there were the UN helicopters and aeroplanes. There were World Food Bank, food programme aeroplanes there. So I got a real sense before I even touched the ground that I was flying into the type of country that I'd never visited before. It was clear that it was going to be a completely different experience. Now,
Lynn Fraser has been on 15 of these expeditions around the world with a camera. So I hope you'll enjoy hearing what she has to say about South Sudan and Ethiopia. First 5 minutes of the show available for free, so click on the link on the website for the Extra Mile. And a mention too, because next week, if you're listening to this on the day it's intended to be listened to, otherwise you might be a little bit behind. But next week we have one of our InVision Zoom shows. Well, we have 2, one for the southern, one for the northern hemisphere, which happens on the first Tuesday of each month. Our PS is to come, but before that, we need a play-out song just to make some final frames to, or think about what's been said today. What's that barking over there, pups? Can you hear that? I'll stop now and put my microphone out and you won't hear anything. Oh, there it is. I don't think that's a dog, is it? I think that's... oh, here we go. I'm going to play with my imagination now. That's the werewolf of Kennet and Avon Canal, that is, pups. Yeah, his tail's gone right down. Our PS to the show is to come, but before that, we need a play-out song just to make some final frames to, or think about what's been said today. And it is from Jessie Reed, a song of time, really. There's a wistful feel to this song, which is the kind I like to walk along with as the play-out song. Although there's an edge of more sinister Daidō Moriyama about this one within the lyrics. And Pups is now walking a little bit faster as we hear that barking over there across the water. What is that, Pups? What is it?
Hanging round after last orders, still so far from home. It's like we're burning into embers, as the fire burns a cold world. As the days keep rolling on, we're living in hell again. But I still hold you in my heart when these days have been and gone. Ooh, 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 ooh. Ooh, 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 ooh. As time goes by, won't keep heading round the circles, never letting go, never letting go. As time goes by, won't keep heading round the circles, never letting go, never letting go. Weight of the world on your shoulders, always ending up the same. Crescent moons have all gone home. We're all fired up, we're tangled up, we're enmeshed to the point we're messed up. As the days keep rolling on, we're living in hell again. I still hold you in my arms when these days have been and gone. Ooh, 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 ooh. Ooh, 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 ooh. As time goes by, don't we keep heading on the circles, never letting go, never letting go. As time goes by, don't we keep heading on the circles, never letting go, never letting go. Round in circles, never letting go, never letting go.
The voice of Jessie Reed, a new voice actually to me, and I'm looking forward to. Oh, there's that. Do you know? I've walked 2-3 minutes along, and that noise is getting closer. What is that? Come on, Neil, you're a nature man now. You've been walking with us in the wilds for what, 3, coming on 4 years? Surely you know what that is. I don't. It does sound a little bit like the noise that the first time I moved into a cottage on my own in the middle of nowhere, we had this strange barking and breaths overnight. And in the morning, the farmer said, as I looked a bit sheepish, I said, "Did you hear that last night?" He said, "Yes, that was, I think it was badgers mating or something." Anyway, where were we? Yes, the voice of Jessie Reed. A new voice to me. I'm looking forward to hearing more from her. Just a few closing thoughts before the PS. My sincere thanks to you if you are or you're about to become an extra miler. We'll keep building this wonderful community together. If you can share it on a Facebook group or in a, I don't know, even a camera club, then I'd be greatly appreciative to you. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT, Andrea Gilpin, who's across Instagram, and Kelly Mitchell, who looks after our Facebook members. Looking forward, Kelly, to seeing you in Scotland. Right, a postscript for the show. Today it's from Aristotle. Oh, get you, Neil. And I was looking for something that was about energy and life, inspired by my guest, Gary Williams. But I did find this, actually. Although this one was a you give life to what you give energy to. And I thought, oh, that speaks very well of Gary. But yes, I've chosen something from Aristotle as the postscript and the words I'll leave you with at the end of today's show. And I think this fits the mood well. And it's this: the energy of the mind is the essence of life.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.